This program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with Eau Claire County. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
I call to order this regular meeting of the Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors on this Tuesday, April the 16th. And we might pause for a moment while the lollygaggers are dribbling into the room. County clerk went to round them up. Are there more people?
Mr. Mowry, and that's it.
Really? Okay. Supervisors, please rise for the honoring of the flag and a moment of reflection by Supervisor Joe Knight. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We can sit down for this. This won't be too heavy.
You promised me it would be short.
Well, that's short's a relative term.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a prayer to read. It's
I'm sorry.
topic is fishing, since fishing is coming up in a couple of weeks, and it's kind of a spiritual activity for some of us. This is written by John Volker, who was a member of this Michigan State Supreme Court. But once he got done with that gig, he moved back up to the Upper Peninsula where he could fish and write. And it's called The Testament of a Fisherman. And when he talks about fishing, he really means trout fishing. And when he talks about trout, he really means brook trout. And fishing also for him means fishing with a fly rod and a dry fly. Other than that, he was pretty open-minded about it. But brook trout were his favorite fish, and we are lucky in this county to have quite a few little brook trout streams. I discovered that for the first time when I had just moved to the county, and I was canoeing down the Eau Claire River in an aluminum canoe barefoot, and every time we paddled by a little stream, the bottom of the canoe would get cold, and what it was is this cold spring water coming into the Eau Claire River. So I should mention too, since we're talking about climate change today, that the DNR has estimated that most of the brook trout streams in Wisconsin will be gone in 50 years, except for a few little tiny ones in this part of the state. Hay Creek up near Tilden is one of them, where the DNR they call it their heritage creek. They're trying to work on it now, so kids in 50 years will be able to see what a brook trout looks like. But anyways, the testament of a fisherman. I fish because I love to, because I love the places where trout are found, which are invariably beautiful. And I hate the places where crowds of people are found, which are invariably ugly. I fish because of all the television commercials, cocktail parties, and assorted social posturing I thus escape. I fish because in a world where most men seem to spend their lives doing things they hate, my fishing is at once an endless source of delight and a small act of rebellion. I fish because trout do not lie or cheat. They cannot be bought or bribed or impressed by power, but they respond only to quietude and humility and endless patience. I fish because I suspect that men are going along this way for the last time, and I, for one, don't want to waste the trip. I fish because, mercifully, there are no telephones on trout waters, or you can turn your cell phone off. This was written in 1963. I fish because only in the woods can I find solitude without loneliness. I fish because bourbon out of an old tin cup always tastes better out there. I fish because maybe one day I will catch a mermaid. And finally, I fish not because I regard fishing as being so terribly important, but because I suspect that so many of the other concerns of men are equally unimportant and not nearly so much fun.
Thank you. Tonight's meeting will be broadcast on Valley Media Works Charter Channel 994 on Thursday at 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. following the meeting, WFRP-LP 101.9 FM, and online at valleymediaworks.org. The next item on our agenda is roll call. Please take your keypads and indicate your presence. Up on the screen. Do we have everybody?
Yes, there's four.
Okay. We have 25 members present. We have a quorum. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is approval of the Journal of Proceedings of April the 3rd, 2019. Motion by Supervisor Henning, second Supervisor DeLuca. Sorry. Any additions, deletions, corrections to the Journal of Proceedings? Oh, okay. I see none. Supervisors, please take, we can do this by voice vote, sorry. All those in favor of approval indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed by nay. It is unanimous. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is public comment. I have 5 persons who have indicated a wish to speak. The first one is Jeremy Greigert. I'll ask the second person to stand ready, Eleanor Wolf. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and County Board members. My name is Jeremy Greigert. I live at 451 Lincoln Avenue here in Eau Claire. Also serve on the Eau Claire City Council. Excited to see this 100% renewable energy and carbon neutrality resolution in front of you. It's a great opportunity to join the city and join the university in an effort to reduce our impact on the environment and really find a specific path forward to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in particular. We, as a city, have been on quite a journey with you on reducing our impact on the environment and looking at our facilities, looking at our government operations, but this resolution goes beyond that to include working with the private sector and the whole county community on what government can do to help with that transition. It also puts I understand there's a $10,000 commitment as part of this in order to start the planning work and preparation to write a grant and also be able to start assessing your carbon footprint in a more detailed way. The city of Eau Claire has about 10 years of data now on our carbon footprint, and we're certainly will be helping share that so that you can complete the full county results. The city is doing a renewable energy action plan this year as well, and we're certainly welcome county board members or staff to be able to join and see that process unfold and have that be a model for you as well. The Green Tier Legacy Program has been a place of collaboration across the state and across the city and county. So that's been a great experience too that this can build upon. The utility companies like Xcel Energy and Eau Claire Energy Cooperative are obviously going to be major partners in this too. And Xcel has now committed to 100% carbon-free energy by the year 2050. So essentially, local communities are helping to push Xcel and also helping to push the state. Our governor recently announced the intent for the state to set a similar goal to this, and he has joined the U.S. Climate Alliance in order to do that. Speaking specifically about counties, like Dane County is really a great place to watch. They have the Dane County Office of Energy and Climate Change. And I think I think we can really be a leader in this state too, and I think are already recognized that way. And this kind of puts us firmly in that on the good side of history. So I appreciate you taking the time to take this up and listening to other folks today. Thanks.
Thank you. The next speaker is Eleanor Wolf, to be followed by Patty Scott.
Eleanor Wolf at 1810 Birch Street, and I hate to do this, to bring you down after that wonderful fish soliloquy, but it's my job. So, but the climate crisis is here, and I'm so glad that the county board is taking up this issue. We don't have a minute to waste. In fact, we should have probably been doing this like 30 years ago, but it's not too late, they say. We may have 10 or 12 years, just 10 or 12 years. So, but just let me tell you what the experts are saying, that if we fail, there will be a future, just an awful one, full of social conflict, dislocation, and violence. And the impacts of climate change will be felt unequally, intensifying inequality along the lines of class, race, nationality, and geography. The national and global 1% will protect themselves. And they won't be feeling the rising seas and the extreme temperatures and the resource scarcity. And they'll keep the hordes out by any means, erecting the border walls and fortresses while the rest of us suffer. That's the bleak look. We have a chance here yet to do something and not have that bleak future, and I think there's still a possibility. So let's act quickly and with all speed ahead. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Patty Scott, to be followed by Austin. I'm sorry, I can't make out your last name. That's okay. All right. You can tell us when you come up.
Hi, I'm Patty Scott, and I live on Dodge Street in Eau Claire. And I'm here tonight to support the resolution for 100% renewable energy and carbon neutrality by 2050, and to designate the $10,000 to kind of support those goals. We know the timeline for reducing carbon emissions is very tight, as Eleanor said, if we're going to avoid the most disruptive climate impacts. Recent events here, right where we live, have given us a taste of what that might look like. In the last year, we've seen storms dumping unprecedented amounts of rain and snow, resulting in everything from destruction of property and flooding, disrupted school and sports schedules, which causes problems with childcare at home, canceled services like Meals on Wheels, disrupted planting and harvesting seasons, and crop loss. And that's not to mention the effects we see out west with the wildfires and to the south with our hurricanes. It seems at this point only prudent to commit to reducing these risks. But I don't want you to think that the only reason to adopt renewable energy is to prevent bad things from happening. We also stand to benefit in both the short and the long term. Perhaps the most immediate local benefit of choosing clean energy is a healthier population. Dirty energy means dirty air, which means more cardiovascular and respiratory disease and premature deaths. Cleaner air saves lives, which in turn saves money. And who wouldn't want that? The timing of this resolution is good because clean energy has never been cheaper. Electricity generated from wind and solar is now the cheapest energy in large parts of the U.S. Businesses and communities around the country have done the math and see it's best for their bottom line. And it's doable. Apple and Intel have done it. Burlington, Vermont has done it. Georgetown, Texas has done it. And we can do it. A transition to renewable energy holds benefits for our local economy. Wisconsin is currently sending over $14 billion out of the state to buy our energy. What if we kept most of those dollars in state? A recent study forecasts the transition to clean energy in Wisconsin would bring 162,000 jobs here, and it would boost the state GDP by almost $14 billion and avoid lost work days. Let's make sure some of that benefit comes to us right here in Eau Claire County. So I encourage you to pass this resolution tonight committing Eau Claire County to clean energy. It will help highlight the need to consider energy and emission impacts as you conduct all of your business as a county board. The City of Eau Claire and UWEC have already made the same commitment, and by joining them, you will expand and strengthen our local commitment to a healthy future. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Austin, who will identify himself. Sorry about that.
No worries. Hi, my name is Austin Northagen. I live at 814 Menominee Street, apartment number 4. I'm a student at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. I'm the director for the Student Office of Sustainability within our Student Senate. And I'm here to voice my support for the carbon neutrality and renewable energy resolution that's before you today. A little background from the university. We have currently this year alone invested in over $100,000 in projects and programs that will make our buildings more energy efficient. We have launched a bike share program, and we've created different sorts of waste diversion opportunities for students so that they too can engage in carbon reducing actions. Now you may be asking yourself, where did a student get $100,000 to promote projects and programs that will create energy efficient buildings? Now that answer is from students. Back in 2011, the student body voted to increase tuition by $10 a student to create a budget of $184,000 that would be solely used to create energy efficient buildings, create programs for green transportation options, and to create waste diversion opportunities. These are the voices of students. These are what students at the university want to do with our money. We see it as a valuable use of our resources and a valuable use of our time. The opportunity before you, I think, is a really, really cool opportunity, at least from the county perspective, to be part of a solution that the city and the university has engaged in. We too, at the university, have committed a climate action plan that has outlined and guided us to be carbon neutral by 2050. So that we can ensure our carbon footprint isn't adding to this problem of climate change, but we are being part of the solution. And it's my hope that the county can join in unison with the city and the university and be part of a solution and continue to be a leader for the state of Wisconsin and for the whole nation in trying to combat this problem and really show the world that we can get this right. And I think this resolution shows that. So with that, thank you.
Thank you. I have no other names on the list, but I see a standby.
Right here, this one.
Oh, I'm sorry, Lauren Becker. Sorry about that, Lauren.
Hi, folks. So as was said, my name is Lauren Becker, and I'm a student at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. My address is 620 Hilltop Circle, and so that means that I'm in the dorms, and I'm actually a resident assistant up there. So that's just a bit of background. And the reason that I decided to come before you folks today is because I love this community, and I love this county. I agree with everything that's been said so far by previous speakers. There's not one thing that I would disagree with. Legislation and action of this nature is necessary at this point in time. And speaking as a student and a young person and someone who, again, loves this community, and I know all of you folks do as well, you wouldn't be in these seats, in all of these seats, if you didn't. I urge you folks to pass this and to take a look at what's being done on our campus in addition to what's being done in our larger community. Yes, because this is something that we need to do out of love. And with that, I yield.
Thank you
So much.
That was the last name, but we have someone standing by. Kate Beaton.
Hello, and thank you for having me. Came a little late. I am Kate Beaton. I serve in the Eau Claire City Council, and I'm a resident of Eau Claire. I am here to thank you for considering this resolution. I was one of the City Council members to bring forward a similar resolution on climate change and on clean energy to the Eau Claire City Council. It's been over a year now since we passed that, and the thing that I was most excited about in passing that on the City Council level was that, you know, as we get continued reports that climate change seems to be more and more of an issue for our world and our local communities. In a time when we see flooding affecting our own communities, our state in dramatic ways that are expensive and displacing people and across our country and our world, I was frustrated to see a lack of action on our state and national level. And this was a way that we could do amazing things on a local level. And my hope was that doing it on the Eau Claire City Council, one of the first in our state and one of the first in our nation, that other communities would follow suit. And so I'm so excited to see that the Eau Claire County Board is doing the same. Something like, I haven't looked it up recently, but something like 85% of the people in our country are represented by cities and municipalities, cities or county boards. And so there's a lot that we can do on the local level, and there's a lot that we should be doing to protect our future and to protect our water and our air and our land. And so I really hope that you will consider this resolution to commit 100% renewable energy. Is that the... Okay, yeah, renewable energy by 2050. So thanks again, and thank you to Supervisor Boer-Boom and Dunning for working on this. There you are. Thank you.
Thank you. I see we have one more speaker. Please come forward and identify yourself.
Hi, my name's Carissa Redbear. I live at 224 3rd Ave, Eau Claire, Wisconsin, 54703. I'm here to speak in favor of this resolution too. I forgot my papers with what I was going to say, but anyway, I'm a part of the so-called Generation Z. We were born from 1995 to 2012, I think. I was born in 97, so I'm an old Zoomer, as they call us. And so something that defines our generation is this culture of nihilism, unfortunately. And it shows up in our humor. I think it's funny, but yeah. Anyway, so that's because we grew up in the recession and with the threat of climate change hanging over our heads. And I have a lot of conversations with my friends about like the future. And there's a lot of anxiety surrounding us. There's like a lot of, people don't strive for success as how I would imagine previous generations would, because we're unsure of our future. And so we can change that if we pass this resolution, because like change will start in small places. Larger government will look to local government for guidance, I hope. And so with your votes, I really hope that we can make a change for future generations. Yeah. Also, water is life. With that, I yield.
Thank you. I see no one else lining up to speak. We will move on to the next item on our agenda, reports to the county board under 2.04.320, beginning with oral reports. And the first up is our Finance Director, Norb Kirk, on the preliminary 2018 finance report. Which I think you have on your desks. Yes? Yes.
Yeah, hopefully everyone has it in their packets. So I'm here this evening to provide a brief review of the preliminary 2018 financial results, primarily from a fund perspective. I say brief review because you'll see that it's only 3 pages long, and as you know, the financial statements will be much longer than that. The problem is, from my perspective, is the financial audit and year-end process takes a considerable amount of time, and so rather than not providing the information until August, I felt it was important to provide at least a preliminary review right now with some caveats, and so you can see where we're at least at this moment in time. A couple things to note, because it again is pre-audit. It's data as of April 11th. There are still transactions that occur. For example, the Department of Human Services, Their revenue availability date goes all the way to the end of June. So I would expect that there would be some entries that would occur as we go through the audit process, some that would just be part of the audit process and some that would be just natural based on things like the human services revenue coming in or other things. Aside from that, I wouldn't expect the numbers to be materially different than you're going to see in the reports and what we're going to talk about. Okay. The report has 3 sections. The first section is a high-level summary of the unassigned general fund balance and what happened from an activity perspective. The second report is a detailed account of what the activity has been so far. And then the third report is looking at all the other funds. Okay. Starting off with the general fund balance in the summary and a little bit more about the unassigned. So just a general reminder that the unassigned fund balance is really one of the indicators of the financial health and sustainability of the county. And it is one of those elements that our bond rating company Moody's looks at when they're determining our bond rating. So it's an important aspect. And you typically can kind of look at the unassigned fund balance from 2 perspectives. One is just a absolute number, and another is a relativeness. So relativeness of the unassigned fund balance to the general fund expenditures. Sometimes it's kind of referred to as a reserve percentage. There's really 2 ways to kind of look at that. Some counties look at that balance as a percentage of the general fund expenditures in the current year. Other counties like Eau Claire County look at it as a percentage of the general fund expenditures in the ensuing year or the next year's budget. Okay, and so we'll talk a little bit about that. So if you look at the unassigned summary, you'll see it's a little bit of a tale of good news, bad news. The bad news is if you look at the net department activity for 2018, you'll see it's a deficit of about $1.7 million. Again, we'll get into that on the next page, a little bit more detail. The good news is there was a certain amount of the unassigned fund balance that we assigned during the 2018 budget process. The good news is we didn't need it. It wasn't required, so we're able to, again, put that back into the unassigned balance. That's the $1,648,000 number. The next number on there is there's a certain amount that we assigned during the 2019 budget process. And that was about $700,000. So when you net all that out, if everything remained the same, our general fund unassigned balance would be about $9.9 million at the end of 18 when we come back and show the final financial reports. That's down about $733,000 or about 6.9%. This will be the second year again that we will have seen a decline in the unassigned fund balance. So it will be something that we'll be talking about in the May 7th meeting because there we'll be talking about kind of the trending of that balance and what we've seen and where we've kind of come from. As a relative data point, if you will, the last time that unassigned fund balance was below 10 million was 2013. So. If you look at the second section, that's where I talk about the metric, if you will, or that financial indicator metric. Again, Eau Claire County has chosen as part of the fund balance policy to look at the unassigned fund balance as a percentage of the ensuing year's general fund expenditures. So for 2019, we estimate those general fund expenditures to be almost $36.7 million. So if we end with that balance, it'll say that percentage or that metric, if we had, would be 26.9%. If you think about that in terms of kind of reserve percentage, that means it would cover a little bit more than 1 quarter worth of expenditures, if you will. The unassigned fund balance is often used for revenue shortfalls, unforeseen expenditures, contingencies, those kinds of things. So the lower that percentage is, the more risk the county assumes in terms of being able to handle those unforeseen circumstances. The county's policy has a minimum threshold of 20%, which would be $7.337 million, and a target of 30%. So again, when we have the May 7th meeting, I will bring charts that will show all kind of that trended activity, so you'll be able to see, again, what's kind of happened. Because in general, we're seeing the general fund expenditures increase and our unassigned balance decrease. So together, that's not exactly the trajectory that we'd want to see. So. Okay, the second report is the more detailed report. That report is broken out into two sections. The first section is really looking at what's the net department activity and whether a department had a surplus or a deficit activity for the year. Again, remind everyone these are pre-audit numbers. There, will likely be some changes. Again, I don't think they'll be material in nature necessarily. And the second section just looks at those things that we're pulled out of the unassigned, we assigned them, and whether we ended up using it and can kind of return it back. So if we look at the department activity, you'll see we had 5 departments that showed a deficit for activity in 2018. I'd say 2 of those are particularly noteworthy. Certainly Human Services having a deficit of about $2.7 million. I think the board's heard before, but I kind of reiterate, predominantly driven by an overage in alternate care. I think we've heard that before. That overage was about $2.8 million. I think even in 2017 it was about $2.4 million. So that's the primary driver of that deficit, at least again we're seeing in 2018. Okay. The other maybe noteworthy one is the Sheriff's Department. There we're showing a deficit of about $233,000. That's primarily driven by out-of-county inmate housing. That accounts for about $175,000 of that. The rest of it is their net personnel costs were a little higher with overtime. On the positive side, we do have some good news again to kind of offset at least some of that. If you'll see in the non-departmental section, it shows a surplus of $324,000. That's primarily driven by an increase in our sales tax collections for the year. Our sales tax collections were approximately $900,000 better than we anticipated or put in our budget. Unfortunately, offset to that, which drags it down to 300, is we had a community development block grant that was from, I believe, 2010, I think it was, that had been transferred to the general fund. We thought we had that availability based on correspondence we had from the state. Unfortunately, the state came back and asked for that money to be refunded, and so we had to refund it out of the general fund. The other next noteworthy one from a positive side would be Parks and Forest. You see they have a surplus of about $142,000. That's predominantly driven by increased timber sales. I think the timber sales were up roughly around $83,000 for the year. And last but not least is the Treasury Department. You'll see that they have a surplus of almost $254,000. That's a combination of 2 things. One, the investment income was about $335,000 better than we had in the budget. I think we've done some really excellent job of the Treasurer's Department managing cash and managing investments, and so we've been able, along with favorable interest rates, to experience some good growth there. The offset to that dragged the number down a little bit is the revenue from interest and penalties on taxes actually came in less, so that kind of brought the number down, but still very good news that the investment income. The second section you'll see it looks like a lot of in and outs. That's because we did have a fair number of those things that we assigned, as I mentioned, as part of the 2018 budget. You'll see for the vast majority of them we assigned a certain amount of dollars, but then we didn't require it. The biggest one of that was there was over $1 million assigned for the health insurance as part of the risk management as we were bringing on the difference card program. We were able to fund that without having to go in to use this assigned balance, so we can then return that back to the unassigned balance. The contingency actually in 2018 was funded two ways. There was $200,000 that was funded by an assignment, and there was $100,000 funded by levy. So we didn't end up using the $200,000 that we had assigned. A little bit of movement with the capital projects. Mainly the difference there is in 2018 we had assigned some fund balance to fund a portion of the 6th courtroom that then in 2019 we actually moved to be part of our normal funding and bonding. So there is a line there. It says 2018 preliminary carry forward request. That will be part of a resolution I'll be hoping to bring to the board in May, which is the typical time of year we'd bring that in. Right now that's coming in at about $261,000. I would say the vast majority of that is related to donations and grants and things that would have the carry forward effect that we would normally see. Okay. If you look at that and you look at what our activity is and you look at what we've assigned again to the next year, you'll see that then we're back to that $9.9 million. Okay. The last report is a report looking at all the other funds. And this one's going to look a little different. So the first line you'll see on there is the Human Services Fund. So a portion of the Comprehensive Community Services, or the CCS funding model, actually gets reimbursed through a reconciliation process that you may or may not be aware of. That reconciliation process is through the Wisconsin Medicaid Cost Recovery, or WMCR. So the good news is we get often a reimbursement for that will presumably fund 100% of the CCS charges. The bad news is it lags a year. So the expenses that we incurred and paid in 2018, we won't get the reimbursement until December of 2019. So last year, we made a decision to basically take the entire deficit of the Human Services Fund for 2017 and bring it to zero by charging it against this unassigned general fund. What I'm proposing here is we wouldn't do that for this portion that we are expecting payment for in 2019, which is what this 1.7 million is. So what I'm doing here is showing that we would show a $1.7 million deficit in the Human Services Fund at the end of 18, which would be offset by a payment we would receive in December of 19, rather than take this Human Services Fund down to a balance of zero, or up to a balance of zero in this case. Okay. You see the other activity in the other funds, the special revenue funds. I don't know that I'd say there's anything a particular noteworthy there. ADRC is predominantly in the nutrition program. You know, revenues were a little bit down and some of the personnel expenses were a little bit up. I think the other ones are relatively small numbers. A little bit of caution on the proprietary funds. So the funds that would have a fair amount of audit activity would be these three funds in the proprietary funds: the highway fund, the airport, and the internal services. Airport and highway record their expenditures during the year in their expenditure accounts, and then at the end of the year we take those expenditures that are truly capital and we reclassify those to capital, and then we also record depreciation. So there will be audit entries that will impact those funds. At this point, I would still expect the airport would probably end with a surplus, and that I would expect actually highway to end with a surplus as well. I would expect the numbers could be a little bit different than what I'm showing here. So, last part is just the notes. Again, these numbers are of as of April 11th. Like I said, I'm not expecting material adjustments from the numbers, but I'm sure there will be adjustments. There always are when it comes to the audit adjustments. As good as we are, there will always be some audit adjustments that occur, as well as I'm saying there could be some late payments still received for human services. And as I mentioned, that human service revenue is still open until June 30th. And then last, The anti-drug fund, or Fund 212, we've rolled all that activity into the Sheriff's Department because really all the resources used to administer that fund are really in the Sheriff's Department. So it's more appropriate to just show that as in the Sheriff's Department. So.
Any questions? Any questions? Supervisor Pagonis.
Thank you. So, Norb, I think you're aware that there are quite a few new supervisors here. So I thought just maybe a couple of words of explanation on a few things.
Okay.
On page 1, that $36,687,000, is that made up of?
You know, that's the general fund expenditures that we project. It's a lot of the general programs, if you will. You know, things that fall outside of, you know, the special revenue funds and et cetera.
Would that be tax levy and sales tax?
Yes, it would include tax levy, it would include.
Sales tax?
If you're thinking about it from a revenue perspective, yeah, it would be the tax levy, it would be the sales tax, those types of things.
And
would fund that.
Does, would forest cuts, would that be part of this? Timber sales?
It would be in the sense that it would be part of their revenue structure, yeah, to the extent that the revenue was, you know, the things that fund the general fund expenditures can come from things other than tax levy. They can come from fees, they can come from fines and forfeitures, they can come from other categories.
Just quickly on page 2, if I were going to interpret the takeaway, we started the year with a fund balance of 12.6, and we're ending the year with a fund balance of 10.6, so we're down $2 million.
Yeah, with a little bit of a caveat. So we're starting with a balance of 12.6 that's both assigned and unassigned, just so we could show the activity. If you refer back to the first page, we literally started the year with the actual unassigned balance of 10.6. So we essentially kind of end with 10.6, but then we assign 700,000 of that to 2019. So the activity from the departments, if you look to the first page, the activity of the departments was a deficit of 1.7 million. We essentially kind of replenished that deficit by freeing up money we had assigned in 2018 we didn't need.
So when you use the expression assigned versus unassigned, unassigned means there's no particular program that it's been attributed to.
That is correct. It is literally unassigned and available for any use, as opposed to assigned, where we've specifically designated those funds available for a specific program or activity.
For clarification on page 3, the top line, the 1,700,000.
Yep.
What percent of the overall CCS program does that represent? About 7 million. It's 7 million something.
I cannot answer that. I'd leave that to Human Services Department. I'm not sure what their total CCS expenditures were for 2018.
In the budget, they had it to be a little bit over $7 million project.
Yeah.
So, just assume that's correct. Have all of the other state funds come in for that program?
I would think that there is still the potential there would be a little bit more that would come in. There was recently almost $300,000 that came in within the last week. So there are times when the Medicaid reimbursement does kind of lag.
And so it came in specifically for CCS?
I believe that to be the case.
And then my last question, what is an internal service fund?
Internal service fund for us is primarily insurance. It's where we have the property insurance, the liability insurance, the workers' comp insurance. The majority of the balance ends up being associated a lot of times with workers' comp.
Do we get interest on that fund? Is that fund invested in?
I am not sure about that.
Okay.
Do we get,
All right.
I guess, yes. Frank says yes, we do.
Oh, good, thank you. That pretty much does it for my questions.
Thank you. Supervisor Chilson, followed by Supervisor Cronk.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Norb, As I look at the report tonight, reviewed my notes, we met on April 8th. I have to be honest, these numbers on the sheet tonight are much, much rosier than they were in our finance and budget meeting that we spent an hour going on the 8th of April. I'm seeing carry forwards and numbers that are being assigned to the fund balance on the worksheet that we never discussed whatsoever in the meeting. I mean, we had talked during our meeting that we were going to have a $4.5 million shortfall, thus taking the fund balance down to a number somewhere in the ballpark of 7 to 7.5. And I understand the 1.7 million that we're setting up now as an accrual, which we're going to say we're going to recoup in December of 19. But the numbers that are represented here are not what we discussed in the meeting the other day. We talked about a $2.7 or $2.8 million shortfall plus a $1.7 million WIMCR on page 3.
Right. So
I'm wondering where the variation comes in, because we spent an hour on this in finance and budget the other day.
So I think the difference primarily is the $1.7 million. That's why I sent out the notice, or I had the meeting with Supervisor Pagonis where we discussed the difference between what was on that report. The other thing is the perspective which we were taking. I may have misstated that the starting point was 12.6 million when it was actually 10.6. So there is a difference in what our starting point. I don't think the ending number is any different.
One number, for example, page 1, line 4, general fund balance assigned carry forward, the 708.
I believe that was on the previous report.
That wasn't a number we discussed at all in my recollection.
I believe we discussed it in terms of netting it out to the bottom line answer. I didn't change, that number didn't change.
I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around when we talked about 7.1 to 7.5 is where we were going to end up, and I'm looking at a sheet that's saying that we're going to be at 9.88. The number, I mean, the 1.7's in play, and I understand that, but the numbers don't add up.
Well, I think we talked about an $8.1 million number, or 8.1 something, which is the difference between the 9.8 and the 1.7 that we moved out. That after our meeting, I had a discussion with our external auditors, and we looked at an option that said we could move that out and show it as a deficit.
Okay, so then I'm gonna ask the further question on the 1.7. We talked about that in the meeting, and it was stated that the previous year's money was not put back or set up as a receivable to the general fund. You said it went back into the operations of the Human Services Department.
That is correct.
So we're treating the 1.7 that's being shown on page 3, line 1 here as a receivable back to the general fund, correct?
Well, it will be back to the Human Services Fund, but we'll record it in the general fund and move it to the Human Services Fund at the end of the year. So it won't be part of their operational revenue during 2019.
I guess that's all I have for now.
Supervisor Cronk, followed by Supervisor Stelches.
I was just hoping to clarify if that 1.7 million is not moved during 2019. Does that allow it to 2018? Does that allow it to be invested and potentially make interest?
No.
Or no, it's not. Okay.
No, it's actually a shortfall. Actually, the county is funding that, waiting for reimbursement.
Got it. And I guess that was my question. I thought there was a change where we didn't necessarily have to pay it ahead of time knowing that the money's going to be coming, but it's just a year late. Okay, that was my question.
Yeah, we end up paying all the expenses up front.
Ahead of time.
Right.
Got it.
Ahead of time, and then get reimbursed a portion
Year later.
a year
Got it.
later.
That I understand. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Stelches.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So back to the 1.7 then, Norb. The previous year, was that also treated the same way?
No, that's why I'm saying that's a difference we're making. Last year, the loss that incurred, or that piece of was rolled into the entire loss of Human
So-
Services.
So by changing the accounting practice or the reporting practice, it does make things look a little rosier.
It does, but it's a better reflection than taking our
Sure.
general
Okay.
fund.
And I'm sure that will be flagged in an audit, that it's a change in accounting practice?
He was not indicating it was a change in accounting practice.
Okay.
I spoke to the partner when we had this discussion.
All right. So let me go back then. I always try to get my head wrapped around the general fund. So let me make an analogy and just tell me if it's generally correct.
Okay.
So if this was my personal finances, and I look at the general fund and I say, okay, I've got $9.8 million in my checking account at any given day. And for the coming year, I expect to spend $36 or $37 million. I expect to get more paychecks during the year, but right now I only have enough money to cover 26% of what I expect to pay for the next year. Is that a reasonable way of looking at this?
No, I would look at it to say we have a budget that has a balanced budget that says we're going to spend $36 million roughly next year, and we have $36 million of revenue coming in. If for some reason we spend $37 million and we spend $1 million more, it's going to come out of this fund.
Okay, so
you only
that's
dip into your checking account if the difference between what you collect and what you spend.
So then if I was prudent, I'd squirrel some of that $9 million over into a savings account or a CD, or I'd maintain some reserve there in case something bad happens. My car breaks down, now it's not in the budget, I need to dive into it. That's what it is. So it's
on a
over and
personal
above.
side, you might view it as your rainy day fund.
Okay, thank you.
Right. It's your just in case fund.
Supervisor Wilkie.
Nora, my understanding is that 1.7 million you had spoken with the auditor, and that it's perfectly acceptable, the change you made in terms of making it a receivable. Is that correct?
Well, again, I would caution to say it's a receivable. We're saying it's going to have a deficit balance. Okay?
Deficit
That's
balance.
different than recording a receivable, but it's appropriate and somewhat maybe advisable at this point to show it as a deficit.
Okay.
Because the reality is it's a deficit.
Okay.
It's a structural deficit based on the way the program works.
That being one of the changes since we had last met. Still, of course, the shortfall in human services, would you say that number is still alarming?
I would say that's alarming. I would say it's, certainly the lack of adequate state funding for what we're seeing continues to be an issue, just as levy limits do. As I said, in 2017, the alternate care number was, I believe, $2.4 million over budget. So, yeah, I'd say it's concerning. I think I'd leave it to Department of Human Services to tell you the things that are doing to change that and make it better, and I think those are in place, but yeah, that's a concerning number.
I brought this up at Budget and Finance Committee, and I think we need to follow it up a little bit closer this year. It seems to me like every year we tend to be overly optimistic about our new initiatives on how it will affect our alternate care number. Now, one wonders it could have been a whole lot worse if we hadn't done some of the initiatives, but it seems like we've got a historic pattern of under budgeting here. Shouldn't we be taking a closer look, putting a more realistic number when we budget there based on our history?
Well, that's certainly something I think we could discuss at the budget time. I think it's a difficult number, probably. It's obviously a crystal ball, and there are a lot of factors that go into play in that number, right? I think if you look at what other counties are experiencing, I don't think we're much different than many other counties that are experiencing, same type of situation in their counties. What exactly that number would be and whether you could base it on historical, I don't know. It's certainly a discussion we could have at the budget time. I think the other thing is there's a number of things in play here. You have the alternate care, you have the CCS program, you have WMCR. There's a lot of moving parts that are occurring too.
Sure.
I think there's the mental health clinic that was, just recently opened or hasn't been open that long. I think that will certainly have an impact. So I think there are definitely things in the works. I understand if you look at this from a historical perspective, this is the second year we've had a significant deficit, if you will. Last year was
We've had a lot of
$1.9 million.
previous years, is my point, if you go back in time. One other comment I'd like to make for the rest of the board members under another category under the sheriff's deficit, we should keep in mind that we did not budget for out-of-county placements. We made that essentially a policy decision, knowing full well that there's going to be out-of-county costs, but we didn't put any money in the budget for that $175,000 we had to spend there.
Nor did we in 2019.
Correct.
So both 2018 and 2019, that was not a budgeted expense.
The good news is, my understanding is that is running lower this year, and hopefully it'll keep that trend.
It is running lower through the first quarter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Supervisor Bates.
Perhaps a little, oops, have I got this on? Perhaps a little historic information as well, and some may know. Human Services hasn't always run a deficit. It hasn't always had an issue with opium, heroin, and the ramifications of that. If you go back a number of years before this societal issue occurred, one year we turned back $1.2 million to the county, and the next year $600,000. So this is not something that's coming out of mismanagement.
Mm-mm.
It's coming out of the fact that our societal issues have certainly cost us dearly, and that it's directly related to foster care and the impact of heroin and other types of issues in family circumstances. So hopefully I realize that what we're doing is a long-term plan. It's not going to change things in a flash, but it will certainly be healthier for our families. It certainly should save us money in the longer term. And we have only been at this about 10 months. So hopefully we'll have some figures by the end of this year that will be indicators as to whether or not this is truly going in a direction that will be not only useful for our families, but less costly to the county.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kirk. The next item on our agenda is the Administrator's Annual Message. Oh, sorry. No, that's Bates. Supervisor Bates, your light came on again. Did you? No, that's my fault.
Okay.
Sorry.
One moment, please. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to present information to you. I've actually put it in the form of a slideshow. It will be a review of the year 2018 from the perspective of our program accomplishments. You heard from the finance director some of the financial information. You will also see in this presentation some information on some of the drivers that are creating the scenario that you see in your financial picture. One of the things that we have stressed as we have gone out, Supervisor Bates and I had the privilege of presenting to the Chamber early this year regarding 2018, where we had been. And one of the key messages that we have been focusing on is how we in Eau Claire County build community. And we do that through our partnerships our connections, and our perception of common enterprise, which continues to grow as we work with our city partners, whether it be the City of Altoona or Eau Claire, whether it be our not-for-profit partners. And we are continually looking for additional ways in which we can leverage the resources of our community to provide better service. The approach that Eau Claire County has taken is one of evidence-based decision-making. We collect the data, we look at the data, we look at best practices, we look at programming that is innovative, that is forward-thinking, and that will fulfill our role and obligation as a county government for the long term. The slide that you see has a number of different resources on there that we as county government, meaning our staff, our board members, use that help to inform the policy that is designed. There are a couple of things that we have actually put in place as resources for you as board members that I would like to show you very briefly. The first is our County Board Resources page. Each of you should have an icon on your iPad where you're able to get to this page quickly. We did a little bit of reformatting of this page so that it's easier to find different topics by looking at the, and your screen didn't change. One moment, I'm going to go right to the website because you should see it's not changing. I will send you the link, but on your resources page, we have reformatted that. We've added more information, and we've added a link to what we call Report Central. And so from there, you will be able to obtain, for instance, this evening's report by Norb Kirk will actually show up under Countywide Quarter 1 Report. You will also be able to find Quarter 1 reports for each of the different departmental areas. There is a short narrative, and there will be financial information. The go-live date on that is May 1st. And so May 1st, you will actually be able to see those for every department and access those at any time. We also have the interagency department reports available at that location, and we're going to begin posting other reports in that area as well, so that if you are looking for a specific report, you can go to this area on the website and obtain that report. The other is Forward Analytics, and many of you are familiar with the Green Book. The Green Book was put out by the Wisconsin Counties Association. They have rolled out, just at the beginning of this year, the branch of WCA that is called Forward Analytics. They have actually brought an individual on staff who is doing the statistical analysis, and it is across the state for the benefit of all 72 counties. There are a number of new articles that are placed on there regularly, as well as the information on the Green Book. So we can start to benchmark and look across the state at what is happening and use it for comparison purposes. And so that link as well is provided. And I obviously did not insert it properly, so it's not working. So I will email that to you. We've gone over these areas before. These are the buckets of services that county government provides. Each of our different departmental areas fit within these 7 public service areas. We look at them as that bigger picture because they're very interrelated often in the services they provide. And for instance, I'm going to use health and social services because we have public health in that bucket. We have our human services there. We have ADRC. We have the veteran service and child support, and they all work together collaboratively to form solutions to help the populations that we serve. And you'll see some of that in some of the bulleted points that review 2018 and the accomplishments of 2018. Leisure and education, one of the biggest things, and you'll see the bar down on the bottom, the red bar, University of Wisconsin Extension has changed its name. They are now a division of Extension, a division of the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And so when we refer to them, they are now referred to as Extension. And along with that change, and I know the University of Wisconsin Extension Committee has been doing a lot of work with our area extension director and others as they've worked through this process. We actually have 2 new agents that are starting with the county. Our horticulture agent is shared between 4 counties, and we're also going to have a community development agent. And that individual right now is doing a needs assessment to determine our programming areas, our priorities, and then an overall plan of work. That individual, in the past, some of the things I've seen is the community development extension agent is able to bring a wide array of services, whether it be in the areas of conservation, economic development, or even social services programs, and bring them together in unique ways. So I think there is substantial opportunity here as we move forward as a county. And that is actually shared between Chippewa, Eau Claire, and Dunn, and we have been working to strengthen those partnerships across county lines, as well as strengthening lines within our own community between the county and the cities. Excuse me, I am going to go back for one moment. We also, in our Parks and Forest program, which is also part of the leisure and education, they have received a number of different grants in 2018 that allowed them to improve and expand trail opportunities. Most of you probably saw that Eau Claire County was noted in the Volume 1 magazine and voted as some of the best in the Chippewa Valley for its parks. And that continues. Health and Social Services, Child Support actually started some unique programming in the last year. They have partnered with Workforce Resources and are hosting monthly job fairs. There has been opportunity in our community for the Child Support Agency to hook up some of our employers with living wage jobs for individuals who need them. And I believe that they've already successfully placed a number of individuals into steady employment opportunities with over $20 an hour pay and health insurance benefits. So it's been a very profitable venture thus far. They also reach out to the children that are in the office if they are there with free books. And you see the numbers of the $16.1 million that they bring into this community for families. And they save around $200,000 in 2018 in out-of-home placements that would have had to occur had they not done some of their work within their agency. Of course, our human services, I hope that you had the chance to participate in their meet and greet this evening and meet some of the staff that are directly providing the service. The significant message that has been part of the human services work in the last number of years is that family connections are always preserved and strengthened, and that is replicated in all of the work that they are doing. It is trauma-informed care that is designed to create the least amount of trauma for all of the participants who are interacting with our government agencies. I think that we can all agree that those times when you have to interact with individuals within our structure can be intimidating, daunting, and it is not necessarily pleasant even if it is necessary or needed. And so the focus has been on improving that interaction and not causing additional harm through that interaction. There are a couple of things that they are doing in order to do that include a child welfare reform initiative. Eau Claire County is one of 4 governments that is partnering with ALEA, which is a national organization that is working on this initiative. We're seeing some results, and I think one of the things that you heard from the finance director as well as others during the previous discussion is that there is work being done to put together some of those metrics. I have a few this evening that are specific to very discrete program areas that we'll be covering. One is the SPARK program, and the SPARK program is one that is based for our juvenile offenders. And rather than simply incarcerating those individuals or putting them in situations that are outside of the home, the focus of that program, and these are moderate to high-risk individuals, juveniles, we have been able to, through the work that's being done in Human Services, and you can see some of the numbers here on the screen, prevented court action in 10 out of 11 of the youth that are in the program. We have prevented residential placements, and the residential placement is around $11,000 per juvenile per month. They have reduced the non-secure placements by 64% thus far, and that was in 2018, and have reduced the secure detention center placements by 47%. Those are significant numbers, and we anticipate those numbers will actually continue. In the area of behavioral health services, you heard a little bit already about the mental health clinic. That actually got a little bit later start than was anticipated. It was November before the clinic was actually up and running, but it took off like a shot. It has been in full swing and has had significant capacity requests already. And so the goal of that, of course, is to provide earlier intervention in therapy, psychiatry, and medication management services. And that's not only for those individuals who are in alternate care and placement situations, but also those that are part of our inmate population. The Crisis Intervention Program, which again is to provide earlier stabilization for individuals in crisis, has been in place. Again, that is an area where we have moved the interaction that we, the county government, have with individuals further down. So they have the intervention well before the crisis hits. And they have implemented and utilized the 211 call service, and that is for anytime you have instances where you need that interaction. One of the examples that was given was a child that was threatening suicide, and this number and this resource, and having that resource was able to provide an alternative to this individual, and it saved a life. In other areas where we've actually utilized the 211 number is during the cold weather that we had. At the beginning of this year, 211 was used as a mechanism for getting information to the constituency, and if they needed assistance, they were able to call that number and receive remediation services that might be needed for the weather event that we had. We're also putting individuals in our jail from our economic support services so that before the individuals actually leave incarceration, they are obtaining services, and we're providing a social worker in the jail to help with reentry. I had the privilege of participating in an inclusivity and diversity conference at the end of last week. We heard from representatives at the Department of Corrections and also an inmate who is in the Department of Corrections working program, a program where they provide resources to help inmates who are exiting the prison population. And it became very clear in that presentation that the individual indicated that their success was very highly predicated upon their ability to have access to those services, and that that made a very significant change in what they were able to achieve. CCS, the need continues. One of the things that you heard from our finance director was the WMCAR payment. And that is a recovery system where the county actually recovers costs for providing services on the back end. Right now, as a county government, we've received around $4.6 million in MA funding, Medicaid funding in 2018 to actually provide these services. Along with that, the remainder, that 1.7, is the actual piece that from a projection standpoint we'll be receiving in 2019. The need continues to be very high in this programming area. I think that one of the things that, from having conversations with the Human Services Board members that we have seen in this program area, is that we began with projections of where we thought we would be as far as overall volume of individuals looking for the services and what we would need in order to develop it as far as infrastructure. The need has far outpaced the original projections. And one of the things that we continue to see is that the need continues to outpace initial projections for service. The chart that you see in the lower right is actually a chart from the Wisconsin Counties Association, and it shows the statewide, what they are calling the statewide funding crisis in the area of children protective services, and what it is doing to counties and what the stagnant funding is doing to counties. Eau Claire County is not the only county that is experiencing deficits because of lack of state funding. This is a message that we continue to deliver to our legislators, to the governor, and to others every chance that we get. There is a request to increase the amount of Children Protective Services funding in the next biennial budget. It is yet to be seen what the state legislature and governor will do with that funding. But it does continue to be and to reach, and I believe that the Wisconsin Counties Association has appropriately termed it a crisis. Couple of other area improvements. Our Aging and Disability Resource Center and our Veterans Service have co-located, and through that co-location they have expanded their service. And from a survey that was done, we have found that they are finding it to be a very beneficial arrangement as far as increasing the amount of service to those who come through the door. The caregiver support group that the Aging and Disability Resource Center is running is fully operational and being run by caregivers. They have created a no-fee transportation option for our qualified senior and disabled clients in 2018, and they continued their paratransit service with their community partners. The Community Health Assessment and the Community Health Improvement Plan for Eau Claire County actually made some progress in 2018 as well. This is a collaboration between our healthcare providers, our public health, and our other agencies within the county. And they have a number of different action teams that are working on specific areas to develop mental health programming, substance misuse, chronic disease, high-risk drinking prevention, oral health, and healthy relationships. They actually have a legislative event coming up shortly where they will go over the data. Our public health, we're fortunate to have a shared public health between the city and the county that collects significant amounts of information and data about the overall well-being of our community, and then shares that and gives opportunity for you as policymakers to participate in that discussion. Transportation and Public Works. Our Eau Claire Airport continues to serve. They've had a 5% increase in ridership over 2017 and a 9% increase in their actual aircraft operations. The roadways, again, you've heard quite a bit about that in the last few years as we have worked on the funding challenges with our highway maintenance. But we do continue to maintain our county roads, our state roads, and some town roads. The highway has implemented GIS asset management as a way of maintaining the 690 lane miles of highway roads that we have, 80 local bridges, and a multitude of other key metrics and key signs, guardrail locations that they have to maintain and manage. And so the GIS allows them to do this through electronic digital means. We actually co-hosted one of the first electronic collection events in our recycling program, and the results are amazing when you look at how many people were served and how much waste was diverted from a landfill. Judicial and Public Safety, pretty soon you're going to be hearing from the Jail Population Work Group that is busy doing the research, putting a lot of information together and a lot of data. This is some of the very quick data to show you how that jail population is changing. and our Law Enforcement and Judiciary Committee could probably speak to this as well. The key takeaway in all of this is that our jail daily population is going up. However, when you look at where it's going up, you will note that in the top, the red number, the 122%, that is actually criminal felony. And so what we are seeing is an increase in the number of more complex and more troubling cases. Most of our criminal traffic and or criminal misdemeanor never go through or are part of our jail population. Our bookings at the same time, you'll note, even though our population is going up, our bookings are down. And so what this is showing us is that the work that is being done by the Criminal Justice Collaborating Council that was put in place about 10 years ago is having the desired effect. And the next piece of the discussion is, how do we do more? And I think that that report is going to be to the board in June. So you'll be seeing more then. Conservation and economic development, our land conservation works with our lakes in the area, and they work with the Watershed Coalition, the Wisconsin DNR, and are able to then obtain grants, and through that make some improvements in our overall conservation. And the specific focus in 2018 was water quality. The West Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission, you will actually be seeing this in about a month as well, but they worked as a partner with the county and others to develop the regional plan for pedestrian and bicycle traffic. And that will be before you again at the second meeting in May. In the area of general government, property fraud alert, you can actually sign up for that. I hope you can see that there's a lot of text there, but there is a www, and you can actually go to that website and actually sign up to obtain alerts. And this is a way to keep yourself informed, because it would notice you if there was ever an interaction with your property. So it is a way that you can protect yourself from fraud. We also have official online records in the county clerk's office. You're able to obtain certified copies of birth, marriage, or death records and land records online. Our circuit court has gone to an e-filing, and all of their case types right now are either voluntary or mandatory in as far as e-filing, and so that is changing the way that we operate as well. The county clerk also has a secure and accurate voting system. It is easy to use for poll workers, voters, and it's very efficient. And one of the key takeaways from this, and especially in light of all of the voter fraud that you see, through 2 successive audits, they have had a 100% match. And so that is the kind of result that we want to see in the county. Community outreach and recruitment, we use social media, Facebook, Instagram. We're going to start using YouTube on a modest scale. And through a number of different school contacts and hosting recruitment fairs, we are taking the county message of employment opportunities out to the larger community. The way in which we are talking to individuals about the opportunity is work with purpose, build community. And it is something that resonates. I think we heard that from some of the young people that presented this evening about what is important to them. And when they can work with purpose, that resonates with them. And we're finding that our own employee population appreciates the opportunity to daily work in ways that improve their community. And you'll start to see more of that as we go through 2019. We also had a number of green and sustainable practices that were put in place in 2018. Our facilities and Frank Drexler working together have continued the energy efficiency and conservation efforts with our LED lighting, new HVAC equipment, expanding building automation, and also looking for energy conservation strategies. We've expanded our solar capacity. As part of that, we participated with the Local Government Institute, with the cities of Eau Claire and Altoona on some strategic visioning, where you look at where it is you want to be, and then you define the steps on how you want to get there. That was actually one part of the work that we are doing with those partners. We are going to continue that effort on other platforms and utilize strategic visioning as we look for ways to continue to work together. The Eau Claire County warning system, the cities of Altoona and Eau Claire County partnered on this, but it is a mass notification system, and you can actually sign up. The sign up is the link that is on there. This presentation will be on the website as well, so you can go and you can sign up, and then you will get National Weather Service alerts right on your phone or your device. It's quite convenient. And our emergency management in 2018, we have a 24/7 duty officer, and they have done some significant work on trainings and exercises with our partners throughout the county. Future challenges, I don't think this is a surprise to anyone, because these are the same issues that we as a local government have been talking about for some time. Revenue constraints continue to be a problem. Mental health issues within our community and the need for mental health services is at an all-time high. Our circuit court volume and our jail population continue to expand. Children in protective service. Again, the state had underfunded us in 2018 by $2.8 million. Local innovation is something that we continue to apply to these statewide issues. And we are a state leader in criminal justice reform. We are piloting a child welfare reform service, and I think that as you look at many of these strategies, they will help inform not only what is going to work for potentially Eau Claire County, but help the rest of the state as well. And our key goal in all of that is to maintain our essential service. You've seen this chart before. It really talks about how we budget operations and capital, the two different areas, and how we use those monies and what the limitations are. And I think that everyone is very conversant with the limitations that the state has imposed upon county government from an operations side. And when you look at the percent increase that we are allowed, that is based on the net new construction, and you compare that to the overall increases that we've seen in the costs of commodities, wages, and any number of other inputs into our system, there is an ever-widening gap. Our levy history, we wanted to take just a quick moment to talk about this, because through all of this and through all of the work that we are doing, and as we continue to talk, when you look at it overall, the mill rate over the period from 2010 until 2019 has gone up by about 47 cents. And when you look at that, if you take an average home and you say it's about $150,000, that's $69.94. So your average homeowner is seeing that much of an increase from 2010 to 2019. And the key takeaway in my mind from this chart is that county government, for a return on investment standpoint, especially as we see the increased need and the increased demand on our services, we're performing and continuing to be conservative, some of which is imposed upon us. The finance director talked a little bit about some of our expenditures. The two charts are based on expenditure. One is total expenditure, the other is levy, and it shows that the difference between the two different pies, and it's probably very difficult for you to read the actual language. But if you look at the total expenditure, the purple is actually the area of health and social services. So that is the largest area of our overall expenditure budgetarily. However, when you look at it from a levy perspective, it changes to public safety. And that's because of the grants and aids that come in through the state and federal government for our human services area. One of the messages that we've shared with our community partners is that we as an organization, starting of course with our elected officials, build community. And we're dedicated to continuing to build community. We build community in ways that others don't necessarily build community. It's through the stability of the family units and ensuring that they have needed resources. It's in offering that public safety element for those who maybe they need to be incarcerated for a time, but then we continue to work with them to bring them back to where we hope they could be in society. And so we in county government build community. And this was going to be my last slide, but I had to add one this evening. We actually have a retirement coming up. Keith Zames is retiring from county service. He has been with the county for 36 years. And I believe you all received an invitation to the April 22nd event. We'll have cake and punch, and it'll give you an opportunity to come in and maybe roast him a little bit. And but we also wanted to let you know that Keith has always been a great supporter not only of county government and has been an exemplar in his service as corporation counsel, but he's also led the way with giving and giving back to this community. And he has been intimately involved with United Way and doing fundraising for that, for the scholarship committee and other activities. And tomorrow, you see that little icon? The tooth fairy, that's a tooth fairy, if you didn't know. And to raise money for United Way, Keith said that we could all put money in pots, and then whichever pot got the most money, he would dress up in that costume. So tomorrow, Keith will be dressed as a tooth fairy. And so I invite you all to come in and see our own tooth fairy. And so I just wanted to take a moment to just thank Keith for all of his work. I've had the pleasure of working with him for the last 4 years, and it has truly been a pleasure. And so here are your opportunities to join me in thanking him.
I had the opportunity to see the lovely tutu he'll be wearing tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you,
Catherine. The next item on our agenda is written reports. You have these in your packet. The contingency fund report, the March 2019 payments over $10,000, first quarter overtime compensatory time report, and the independent agency reports. I see no, excuse me, Supervisor Neiman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is just a simple question and probably has a very simple answer. But on the compensatory time report, can you tell me how can the hours taken be more than the hours earned as listed on the report?
Nord? Would you come up to Supervisor Gatlin's microphone there?
Oh, sure. Yeah, employees have the opportunity to carry forward their balances, and so they don't get cashed out at the end of the year. At least that's the current process. So many of them have balances. They can accrue up to a balance of 40 hours.
So we just don't get to see that?
No, we don't typically. We did show balances at the end of the calendar year, I think, just to relative so people understood how many hours were out there. But we won't typically report those hours.
Okay, thank you.
I see no other lights lit. We'll go on to presentation of petitions, claims, and communications. We have a rezoning request from owners Signature Homes of Chippewa Valley, which will be referred to a later meeting. Rezoning request from owners Daniel and Patricia Green, also referred to a future meeting. And third, a proclamation proclaiming the week of April 28th to May 5th, 2019 as Soil and Water Stewardship Committee. I'll ask the clerk to read the proclamation.
Whereas fertile soil and clean water provide us with our daily substance, and whereas effective conservation practices have helped provide us a rich standard of living, and whereas our security depends upon healthy soil and clean water, and whereas stewardship calls for each person to help conserve these precious resources. Now therefore, Chair Smyer of Eau Claire County Board of Supervisors does proclaim April 28th to May 5th, 2019 as Soil and Water Stewardship Week in Eau Claire County.
And Chair Smyer asks for a motion to approve this from the board. I don't like to put my name on something without knowing that the board approves. Supervisor Kronk, are you moving approval?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there a second? Supervisor Neiman, thank you very much. Any questions? All those in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. All opposed by nay. Thank you very much. Supervisor Kronk, I see your light is lit. Did you want to comment?
I actually, and I tried to do it before this, think that's okay. If this is the appropriate time to just give some quick updates about some upcoming trainings.
This is the time for communications.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to let everybody know that there will be, Jonah is hosting an implicit bias training. That's going to be at First Congregational UCC here in Eau Claire on Saturday, April 27th from 8:30 to 12:30 a.m. If you're interested, you can contact Jonah, and it's to begin having conversations around racial equity in Eau Claire and our larger society. They are serving breakfast. And then the next one is an upcoming, it's called the STAR training, Strategies for Trauma Awareness and Resilience, and that is a week-long training. It's from Monday, May 13th to Friday, May 17th in Minnesota. I did have the opportunity to attend that training last fall, and it's phenomenal. I did forward, as also we're becoming a fully trauma-informed agency, I think it's important to start kind of getting going on having some of that training so that no matter who walks in any door in our county agencies, that everybody's trauma-informed. I did email those to Administrator Schaff, and she did agree to pass that information on to via email. But one that I missed, and I would also like to share, that's upcoming through the Justice, hang on a second. I was having trouble attaching it to the email, but the Center for Justice and Law through Hamline University is holding a conference called The Criminalization of Mental Illness, and that's on April 26th from 8 to 4. It's completely sold out, but I have 3 extra tickets, so if anybody's interested, they could just email me. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Are there any other announcements or communications? Our next item is number 8, first reading of ordinances by committees, file number 8.
This ordinance makes update changes to the county code in section 10.
This is an ordinance change. This is first reading, and it will come back to us again in our next meeting. We have no items under number 9, first reading of ordinances and resolutions by members. We will go to item number 10, reports of standing committees, commissions, and boards under 2.04160 and second reading of ordinances, beginning with Committee on Administration, file number 11.
Postponing construction of the 6th courtroom until the Wisconsin legislature creates a 6th Eau Claire County Circuit Court judge position.
I believe Supervisor Wilkie. Oh, excuse me. Motion, Supervisor Wilkie. Second, Supervisor Bates. Thank you. And speaking to the item is Supervisor Wilkie.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administration Committee brings you this resolution on a recommendation of 4-0 that you pass it. What this resolution does is clarify and reaffirm our commitment wanting a Sixth Circuit judge. Back, as you can see with your attachments, we passed a resolution in August of 17 that Resolution 52, that we requested that the state grant us a Sixth Circuit Court judge. And in that resolution, we referenced our fact sheet under the resolved, whereas we were committing to the state that we would remodel with the estimated costs there. We committed to the state that we were willing to accept the additional operating cost. We also committed to the fact that we are understanding that we would get an annual increase in our state court grant. There has been some confusion. What if the state does not grant us a judgeship? My experience on judiciary law, who introduced this, and also on budget and finance, that the intent was to build out that court only if we got the 6th branch, that there was no discussion about spending $750,000 bonding plus interest to end up with just the nicety of a spare courtroom. That would not be very prudent on us, our part. This does reaffirm the fact, though, that we would like the 6th courtroom, and if the legislators do grant it in their budget, we're up, ready to go. We have put it in the budget. The reason that Budget and Finance put it in the budget was not for the purpose of spending it come hell or high water. It was the purpose that we recognized that we had to obligate ourselves to have those dollars there if, in fact, the legislators granted us 6th court. All this does is reaffirm our position. We want the court. We'll move ahead with it if it is granted, but if not, we will not build out that courtroom as a 6th spare courtroom. If there's a case to be made for that, it should have to go through the normal vetting process as all capital projects have to go through. Not, so to speak, come in the back door. I'd encourage your support of this resolution.
Thank you. Supervisor Dunning.
There has been some concern that's been expressed that if we didn't have the courtroom in place, that the judge may not be awarded to us. Late this afternoon, I received a message from Representative Emerson, who said that the state was okay with delaying the building of the courtroom as long as it is ready by the time a judge is sworn in. So they wouldn't be elected until April of next year. And don't know how long the swearing in takes, probably a few weeks, but we would need to be ready by that time. And we would know that probably by the 1st of February that there's going to be a race. So whatever that means, they aren't going to hold it against us if we don't have it in place immediately.
Thank you. I see no other, sorry, Supervisor Buchanan.
I guess this is more of a clarifying question than anything else. If we vote this resolution up and then the 6th branch is awarded, will we need a separate authorizing resolution from this county, or will construction begin immediately or relatively immediately?
Responding, Supervisor Wilkie.
No, we will not need another resolution. We're up and ready to go. We've even got the blueprints. You're reauthorizing something you did there. So no, it will not have to come before this body again.
Thank you. Supervisor Russell.
Thank you. I just had a question about the resolution saying that Eau Claire County currently is ranked number 7 in the state for receiving it, but back in 2017 we were ranked number 3 behind Sawyer and Dunn counties. Did something significantly change in our need for the judgeship?
Supervisor Wilkie?
That one I can't answer. I'm going to have to defer that one to either Corp Counsel or Administrator. I would only be guessing that things have changed since that time.
And actually, the state of Wisconsin does the weighted caseload, and so that's done at the state level, and they utilize a number of factors in coming up with that number based on the caseload. One of the things, though, that they do not include in that caseload is the treatment court caseload. And so for Eau Claire County, even though we've got our treatment courts and are running our treatment courts, that's not even factored into those numbers.
Thank you.
Thank you. I see no other lights lit. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote on file number 11. That is 25 yes, 1 no. It passes. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is file number 3.
This is a resolution to establish goals of 100% renewable energy and to carbon neutrality by the year 2050 for Eau Claire County, and to amend the budget to move $10,000 from the contingency fund for initial planning.
Motion. Supervisor Boerboom. Second, Supervisor Bates. Speaking to this, Supervisor Gibson. Sorry, Supervisor Gibson. Pre-planned here. Go ahead.
Right, you got my light on too.
It is on.
All right, Supervisor Dunning sits on planning development also, and he's been involved in this since the very, very beginning of it. So I'm going to ask if Supervisor Dunning can speak to this.
Okay, thank you very much. Supervisor Dunning.
Thank you. If you read all 9 pages of the handout that came with it, the purpose of the resolution, as was stated, was to meet the Paris Accords as far as maintaining a temperature that it not increase over 2 and that we keep it at 1.5. And in doing so, we've been looking at a variety of, we've been looking at that as we have already. We've been part of the Green Tier legacy. We've done working with the city. We've been doing it on our own. And so we've been starting that, but this puts it official and gives us the goal that we need. And the goal, of course, is to reduce the number of greenhouse gases. And on the fact sheet that was supplied, you have the source of the greenhouse gases, the carbon dioxide, the methanes, nitrous oxides, fluorinated gases, and you see that where they're mainly produced. Transportation is at 28+%, electrical production is 28%. And there's a variety of other things. So the purpose then is to align the county with doing this and to set up a work plan to not only bring the county government portion of it into compliance, but also to work with the community outside of the city of Eau Claire, because the city of Eau Claire is already doing it, but to work with the community outside the city to bring them into compliance also. And some of this has already been started. There's Xcel Energy is already at 38% of their goal of reaching that, as opposed and they count for 80% of our hookups in Eau Claire County. So we're going to be looking at those, and there's a set of implementation steps that they're draft, but as we go through, the various departments will be looking at it as part of their work plan, and as they go through the years. One of the interesting things about it, one of the questions that's always been asked is, what is it going to cost us? In many cases, in order to get new equipment, we got 31 years to reach the goal, and most of the HVAC equipment is going to be replaced at least once, if not twice, within that time, and therefore will become part of the planning process for actually getting into it. So it won't be like we're going to run right out and buy all new HVAC equipment or all new methods of production. So it will same way with vehicles, the county vehicles. We'll have generations of improvement during this period of time that we will be able to lock into. So big education is going to be a big part, and we're looking at it, and so there's a lot of that. The portion of it that required, one of the last things on the resolution was to allocate $10,000 in 2019 and to come out of the capital projects, no, out of the,
Contingency fund?
Our budget, anyway. So that is going to be, there's a detailed sheet that was handed out tonight that gives you the idea of where that's going to come from. I looked at initially staff time as we get set up in this first part of the year. 20 hours, $2,000. And it would be great if we could hire an intern. The university has a number of people that have been working in this area, and there's a class that works around this. And we could spend some money there. We also have some software that could be used that will help us to allocate and to convert the gallons of gas to carbon, et cetera. And but there'll be staff training, et cetera. And so I figure an estimate was $10,000. So that, and then we would like to get a grant so that we could hire possibly a full-time person, or at least a portion. The State Wisconsin of Energy Innovation Grant, the city has that, and they do have a grant possibly in the 2019 that maybe we are eligible for. So that would be where matching funds would be put into the capital projects funds. So that's kind of the summary of what the resolution is with that. I would like to turn this over to Supervisor Boardman now and let her discuss it.
Supervisor Boardman.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really, really, really excited that this is something that we have the opportunity to even discuss before the county board tonight. Both of my parents are geologists, so I spent a lot of time outside growing up. We live on 30 acres of swampland, so, we grew up fishing and hunting and just running around and stuff like that. So I really had the perspective of a naturalist environmentalist growing up, and that carried into one of the decisions I chose to come to Eau Claire for school. As we all know, there's a lot of natural beauty around Eau Claire, and things like the rivers and the forests that we have around here provide a lot of opportunity for people to be outside and to incorporate that into, our workforce, the places that we walk every single day, the university, everything like that. And so that was one of the reasons why one of my biggest motivators to run for this position actually as well was to work towards the environmental integrity of Eau Claire and to kind of preserve that and strengthen it even more. So I think that this resolution is a really great step in the right direction, not only for our county, but for the state of Wisconsin. I think we are setting a really great example for other counties, and we're taking the lead in something that is really desperately needed, not only in Wisconsin, but across our country and world for, further down the road for when, I'm older and maybe your grandchildren are older too. So I really urge your support on this. And I think the fact that this is there's 31 years to complete this is, I think it's kind of a no-brainer, like Jim said. A lot of the equipment that we use now will be replaced once, if not twice, in the next 31 years. And there's opportunities with each new replacement to get, things that are more environmentally friendly and green to work towards this goal of 100% carbon neutrality by 2050. So, I really urge your support, and I'm excited that we are able to do this tonight.
Thank you. This item came through two committees. Supervisor Bragonis, do you wish to add to the background?
I would not. I would have deferred to Supervisor Dunning.
Supervisor Jansen.
Thank you. I'm just very excited to see this as well tonight. One of the things that I was doing in preparing for this meeting is I wanted to compare what the Eau Claire City Council recently passed, and so I just typed simply into Google, Eau Claire City Council climate resolution, and one of the first things that popped up was actually a reference to it on the Environmental Protection Agency website, the EPA website, had a reference for it. So this will not only set a model for other counties in our state, but it also is something that can be a model that could be used nationwide. The relevance of this is so important. I work a lot with young people in my position, and one of the young people that I have been really inspired by recently is a young lady named Greta Thunberg. She is a 16-year-old climate change activist from Sweden. And she has helped organize school strikes for the climate change movement. She also recently spoke to European Union leaders in January, and I want to share just a little piece of what she shared there in her speech. So give me just one moment to pull it up. She said, "Adults keep saying we owe it to the young people to give them hope, but I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to panic. I want you to feel the fear I feel every day. And I want you to act. I want you to act as you would in a crisis. I want you to act as if our house is on fire, because it is." That is one of the most powerful quotes that I have heard about this. It really stuck out to me. And I think all of us felt that same fear that she feels from that last young woman who spoke in our public comment today. And so is this going to necessarily be easy? No. Is funding going to be something that we're going to have to look at closely? Yes. But I don't think we really have another option. We can either continue to fan the flames, or we can make an effort to try to extinguish the fire. Are we going to be able to put it out completely? No, but anything that we can do to slow the burn can help to save lives. So thank you for bringing this to the table, and I really urge everybody to approve this.
Thank you. Supervisor Stelchis, followed by Supervisor Buchanan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I too am really excited to see this. I think it's a great goal. A lot of the fact sheet and material that was presented, I think, was very helpful. But I wanted to point out something that I think maybe was not touched upon as much in some of that material. One of the goals is to reduce emissions, and I think that's personal for all of us. We know, what we do and how it affects emissions. But the other side of that equation is what gets absorbed. And it's not entirely clear to me if our county is carbon positive or carbon negative. We may, because of our geography, actually absorb more carbon than we emit. I don't know that. So I'm really anxious to see people study this. It's very clear that rural areas are going to have to absorb a lot of the carbon that urban areas are going to generate because they don't have the opportunity to absorb it. So as I think about what we as a county board can do, I think there is a lot of opportunity amongst us to have an impact on the absorption side of this equation. Our county forest is 20% of the land mass of the entire county. And the forests, and particularly the underground parts of the forest, are some of the greatest carbon sinks that we have. Similarly, the committees that work on agricultural policy can have a huge impact on the carbon that we absorb. Disturbing soil releases carbon. Everything that we can do to create permanent crops, cover crops, and so on will continue to absorb more carbon. So I think we should be excited about the opportunities and recognize that we can all make policy changes that can actually affect the absorption side of this equation. So I'm certainly going to support this.
Thank you. Supervisor Buchanan, followed by Supervisor Neiman.
I want to first thank Supervisors Borboom and Dunning for all your hard work in bringing this legislation forward. And I also want to thank the members of the public, although it looks like a lot of them had to take off, for their support in coming here tonight. I believe that it is no exaggeration to say that this piece of legislation is likely the most important legislation that I or anyone else here on County Board today will ever vote on. Not the most controversial, but the most important. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here today to tell you that we are just 2 minutes away from midnight. It's 2 minutes from midnight. Now, a lot of folks from my generation and generations after me probably don't understand that reference, but I think a lot of the folks in this room here do. You see, in 1945, scientists at the University of Chicago, the ones who helped develop the first atomic weapons for the Manhattan Project, founded the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, and 2 years later, they created the Doomsday Clock. For decades, folks across the country and the world would watch their evening news to hear if we were marching ever closer to our own civilization's destruction. The decision to move or leave in place the minute clock for the doomsday is made every year by the Bulletin's scientists in consultation with their Board of Supervisors, which includes 15 Nobel laureates. I say this because in 2017, the Bulletin moved the time of the doomsday clock a half a minute closer to midnight, in part because of the reckless approach in our world towards nuclear weapons and the growing dangers from experiences needing to address our biggest challenges, which are most importantly, according to them, climate change. 2 years later, today in 2019, the doomsday clock sits at the closest now it has ever been to midnight than at any point during the Civil War. Because as the Bulletin warns us, avoiding the catastrophic temperature increases in the long run requires urgent action now. I could go on and read more reports from other scientists, including Dr. Leanna Stravinsky, who has mentioned that if dying in a flight accident was like rising global temperatures and the deaths that come from that, then the number of people dying in those flight accidents would be 15 million a year. My generation has been described as some as the generation that will be on the business end of climate change for the rest of our lives. Our generation is the one that's going to have to spend the money to rebuild the levees, to clean up after the tornadoes and floods, and to spend the medical resources necessary to address the spread of deadly diseases, all from our changing climate. It is therefore imperative that we all do our part to do everything we can to reduce and mitigate the impacts of climate change. So therefore, on behalf of my generation and every generation to come hereafter, I want to thank those who brought this resolution forward and strongly urge everyone to vote yes, because all of us must do our part to address climate change, because if we do not, none of us will have a future.
Thank you. Supervisor Neiman, followed by Supervisor Gatlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I attended the Katharine Hayhoe UWEC forum lecture at Schofield Hall last week, and the most impressive thing that I learned from that was some research that she showed stating that the majority of people know that climate change is real, that it exists, but a minority have any idea of how it will personally impact them. My grandchildren will be 11 and 14 at the time when climate change is going to make irreversible damage to our planet. And so that just makes me horribly sad. I've done what I can do. I have solar panels on my roof for my water heater. I have invested in the Xcel Energy Solar Connect community because the only way I could put them on my roof for the rest of my electrical needs would be to cut down trees, which I don't want to do. I drive an electric hybrid vehicle. What we need beyond individual action is community action. The government agencies, corporations, and institutions of our community to take action. There is a cost for doing nothing. That can be just rising energy costs related to the more difficult extraction of fossil fuels. We'll have to pay out more for emergency weather management that we've talked about tonight. There have even been lawsuits lodged against government agencies for failure to address this issue. We will pay, and I would rather pay the small amount to start this planning process up in a way that can help rather than to continue to throw money in from measures that cause harm. So please support this resolution.
Thank you. Supervisor Gatlin, followed by Supervisor Dunning.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I did some research of my own and came across a report by Environmental Entrepreneurs and Clean Energy Trust that tells us that the Midwest already is way ahead in creating jobs in clean energy and moving to clean energy for energy, for powering things. And given the timeline and doing it in an organizing way, we have time to train and educate people so we can create lots of good, skilled jobs. It said that 6,000 jobs in 2019 is expected in the Midwest if we move towards clean energy, ahead of the anticipated and ahead of the national growth of jobs in the same area. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Dunning, followed by Supervisor Coffey.
Follow-up to the job issue. I checked today. My family was fortunate enough to, in 2009, to have a wind generator put on our farm. And in checking today, I found out that there were 13 employees hired to run those 135 wind generators in that area. They are now in the process of that was for 200 megabytes or megawatts of power. They're in the process now of increasing that by 800 megawatts and expect also to hire another 15 people to handle those wind generators. So we are seeing it definitely has a hiring impact. But while I was also doing research today, I found out, if you notice, that nitrous oxide is one of the greenhouse gases, and it supposedly is 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide, but it made up a small portion of the greenhouse gases. But one of the things they found, and was just published this last month, that as the permafrost in the Arctic is melting, and we hear about it in Russia, we hear about it in our own area, but it's releasing 12 times more gas than previously thought. So as we go along, problems are getting worse. We're not just staying stable with what we already knew. We're just seeing that there's another gas that's becoming even more critical, and it's harder to take care of because it's coming out of an area that we don't control. We don't control the permafrost. That's an area that we can't improve. So that's just some latest information and more reason for support.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Coffey.
I also went to hear Dr. Catherine Hayhoe as well as Supervisor Knight. And one of the things that I took away from this was that many people know that climate change is happening, but we don't talk about it. And unlike Supervisor Neiman, who I applaud, many of us are not doing as much as we could, me included. And one thing she spoke about is the day-to-day things that every citizen can do. And as we talk about it, I think we're more likely to do it. Things like recycling, reducing food waste, purchasing less goods. So I think we should support this.
Thank you. Oops, sorry. Supervisor Moritz.
Thank you. I haven't been on this board for too long, but I noticed that when my constituents talk to me, they can define problems very well, but very rarely do they define solutions to help me. And so what I'd like to know is, in a short year and a half, what are we going to do to reduce things by 5%? If it's easy, then I want to make certain that it's not just we're going to have some meetings and we're going to have somebody calculate some carbon and say we've already met the first 5%. So 31 years is a long time in the future, but 5% in the next 16 or 18 months is a short period of time. Is there anything that we can talk about right now that says that the community is going to do and Eau Claire County government are going to do in the next year and a half to make things 5% better? That may not be as easy as it sounds, and I think this is an important resolution, but we have to do more than just have a resolution. We have to have a solution, not just a solution.
I'm going to direct that question to Supervisor Dunning.
Thank you.
Agreed. That is the important part. One of the things that we have to do as part of this plan is to know where we currently are. We do not know that. Theoretically, it's possible that we already have met the 5%, as you say. The fact that Xcel Energy has got 38% of their energy already carbon-free and that covers 80% of our residents in the county, gives us a good head start. But that doesn't keep up for very long. So as we go through and determine where our balance is, we are going to have to address look at all of the issues that make up the cause and start working on the solutions, whether it's education to farmers, whether it's education to farmers as far as fertilizers, whether it's education on recycling, whether we go out to the landfill and cut down on the methane that's being escaped out there or coming out of our wastewater treatment plants. There's a variety of ways that the things that we don't always know where our problem is at. So I think the first goal is to find out where the problem is within the county and then go to work and set up that. Yes, is it possible we missed the first 5%? It's a possibility, but we also may be there once we start calculating, because as it was expressed by Supervisor Stelgis, we do have 53,000 acres of trees that probably is more than the national average that was used to calculate the 11% absorption. So we are looking at a possibility that our forests have already helped us more than we think. So until we know what our baseline is, I guess I can't give you a firm answer on how we will compare to the 5%.
Thank you. Supervisor Bates.
Thank you. It's very easy to think in terms of talking about something. But the fact of the matter here, the discussion that has occurred creates public awareness. And whether that means that you're much more careful of your recycling, or whether that means that you began to use something other than plastic for storage and for throwaways, or whether that means that you decide to work with neighbors to put in some solar panels in your area. I think the important thing is inspiration. The next thing is to be an action that actually works to reduce it. I have no doubt that this can be done. And I have no doubt that the leadership provided by young people will be the way it gets done. It isn't going to be by individuals who feel like naysayers or putting in barriers. It's going to be by people who have a vision for a different kind of world, where you can keep fishing, where you can do the things you want to do with your family, and where you honestly are committed to saving the planet, because that's what this is about.
Thank you. I see no other lights lit. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand. I want to advise you that this particular motion requires a 2/3 majority because of the money from the contingency fund. That will be 17 affirmative votes. Sorry? Oh, sorry. Rather than those present, it's the entire board, so it requires 21 yes. We have 25 yes, therefore the motion passes. Thank you very much. Next item on our agenda is file number 1.
Authorizing submittal of an outdoor recreation grant application and agreement with the Wisconsin DNR, directing Parks and Forest Director to take all steps necessary to comply with the grant requirements.
Motion, Supervisor Schroffnagel. Second, Supervisor Boerboom. Speaking to this, Supervisor Stelches.
Mr. Chair, this is a ongoing grant. This resolution allows us to apply for the grant that we have done in years past. It comes from the DNR, and it provides roughly $25,000 a year, which is targeted exclusively for maintenance activities at the Tower Ridge Park. The awarding of this grant goes through a scoring process with the DNR. Our application in previous years has always scored high because of the high quality of facility that Tower Ridge is. We do not apply for this grant at some of our other parks because we've believed that it probably would not score as high, and we've really been told so by the DNR. But I would encourage you to do that. It really helps us continue to keep that facility up. And as I mentioned perhaps a few months ago, one of the other things that we hope to get going up there is a new skills park that will be associated with cross-country skiing, and some of this money can be used for that as well. So I would urge your support.
Thank you. I see no lights lit here. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote on file number 1. That passes 26-0. Thank you very much. Our next item is file number 10.
Designating free park entrance for all Eau Claire County parks, April 22nd through April 28th, 2019.
Motion. Supervisor DeLuca. Sorry, I was a little overwhelmed by the hands there. Supervisor Moritz, second. Thank you. Speaking to this again, Supervisor Stelches.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. This resolution has been sort of on a fast track. It just came before the Parks and Forest Committee last week. We were approached by Beaver Creek to participate with them in their activities that are planned for Earth Day, which is next Monday, and they have basically expanded that to Earth Week, where they're having a series of activities to encourage people to go out and take part in nature activities. One of the things that they asked if we could suspend the fees to all the county parks for that week in order to participate in that program. The Parks and Forest Committee voted unanimously to support this. This does not apply to camping fees, but rather just to the daily park entry fees, which I think are $5 per day. We went back and looked to see what we collected in the last week or so in those such fees, and it was about $360. So that's our estimated impact. I would hope that we make that up by encouraging perhaps a few newbies to join and participate in our parks and forest. So I again would ask for your support.
Thank you. Supervisor DeLuca.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'd like to just explain a little bit about the Beaver Creek challenge. It's trying to get people to be more sustainable, be more environmentally conscious. You can choose a team. It can be parents and kids. It can be up to 5 adults. There is no registration or fee. You have to register online your team, pick a captain, but it doesn't cost you anything to join. And then they have up to 60 challenges set out in 7 categories. Some of the categories were like don't be an energy vampire, turn it off and opt outside. So it tries to get people to look at more sustainable types of activities. And you get points for your tasks that you do. And if you earn 5 points for your team, you get your name or your team name put in for memberships for Beaver Creek or to get passes to go to the Butterfly House. It also, if you earn 35 points or more, you can get chamber bucks, you can get free composting services, or you can get the Triple Play membership, which is Beaver Creek Children's Museum and the Chippewa Valley Museum. So I suggest support for this. Beaver Creek has been known as one of the top ranking areas to go for ski trails, for just activities for families. So I request your support. Thanks.
Thank you. I see no other requests to speak. Supervisors, please take your keypads in hand and vote on file number 10. Supervisor Gatlin? Oh. That motion passes 26-0. Thank you very much. The last item on our agenda is the appointments. As the chair, I made these appointments. We're required to have them approved by the board. So the chair will entertain a motion to approve all of the listed appointments rather than go through them one by one. And I see Supervisor Bates has her hand raised, making the motion. Supervisor Wilkie is seconding. Is there any discussion? Are there any questions? All those, I'm sorry. Oh, we can do it by voice vote. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. It passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We've reached the end of our agenda. We are adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and Eau Claire County. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.